Hi everybody, welcome to our live event. My name is Brenda KB Anderson and I'm a crochet designer and instructor. And today I'm going to be showing you guys how to make the radiant neck warmer. So here it is right here on the dress form. I'm going to pull it off here and pop it over so you guys can see it up close here. So this is a really squishy, stretchy, warm cowl and sort of my the reason this happened actually is because I had two skeins of this really, really beautiful yarn, which I'll talk about in a little bit, and I wanted to make the most of that yarn. So I wanted to make something that was warm, and I knew that it wasn't going to be enough for a scarf. So I wanted to make a cowl, but I wanted to make sure that it would sit nicely on my shoulders and then be nice and warm as well. So that's sort of like the inspiration behind this design. So it looks a little bit asymmetrical when you wear it. Excuse me. It's folded over at the top. You can see there's this little fold up here. And then it kind of comes over and one point goes this way and another point goes in this direction on the front and on the back. And there's a slit here on the side. And then there's also a slit here on the other side that's tucked underneath. And those slits allow it to sit down on your shoulders, so it can kind of spread out a little bit there, but then you do have that extra length in the front and in the back to keep you warmer. So it's coming from a functional place, but I wanted it to be really beautiful as well. And that was easy because this yarn is so pretty, and I found a really cool stitch pattern that I like just by doing a little bit of experimenting. This is actually sort of a variation of the moss stitch, which is one of my favorite crochet stitches. And so we'll get into that in a little bit too once we start working this up. So this is a live event. If you guys want to say hi, if you want to, let me know if there's anything that I'm doing that's confusing or you need a little bit more clarification, you can put those questions in the comments and I'll be answering them during this live event. Also, if you guys have any suggestions for future live events, I love it when people throw those in there too. I've got a couple of things that I'm working on because of suggestions from you guys, so I really appreciate that. And if you just want to say hi or if you have advice, crochet-wise for your fellow crafters, pop that in, in the comments box as well. So, all right, so all you really need is 2 skeins of a chunky weight yarn. And of course, the skeins that, it's going to depend on what brand or type of yarn that you're going to buy. That's going to tell you if you need 2 skeins or possibly 3 skeins. The yarn that I'm using, you only need 2 skeins. This is a special yarn that's hand dyed. It's from Muse 2320, which is one of my favorite local yarn stores. It's kind of local-ish to me, not super local. It's a little bit of a drive, but I really, really love this yarn. I mean, the shop is just amazing, so I kind of wanted to highlight that today because normally, in my live events, if you guys have watched these before, normally I try to choose yarns that are, easy for everyone to get and more prevalent in you can pop into a store and you might find that yarn that I'm talking about. A lot of times I kind of go towards those yarns and look for, affordability and availability and those types of things first for these live events. But I do really love hand-dyed yarns and I do really love highlighting smaller businesses as well. So every once in a while, a couple times a year, I like to feature something like that in my live events, and just kind of show off their cool stuff. Okay, so I'm going to be using this yarn. This is it's from Muse 2320. It's a rhino. It's called the Rhino Base, and this is the color Velveteen. And I also got it in Fern here as well. And then later a sample I'm going to be doing it in this. This is the blue hydrangea, I believe is the name of this color. I'm not quite sure and I don't have my tags, so I'm pretty sure that's what it is. But I am going to also be showing you my samples in a couple of other yarns. I've got Swish by Knit Picks or also crochet.com sells the same yarn. And this is a chunky weight Swish. I don't remember the color of this one, but this is also a really super soft merino, as well as this rhino is a very super duper soft merino wool. It's a super wash. And then I'm also going to be showing you the yarn in this. This is Hue and Me. I believe that's Lion Brand, pretty sure. But this is a more budget-friendly yarn from a big box store, just so you can kind of see, how all these different things work up. Because I know that, everybody's got different price ranges and availability and all that sort of thing. Okay, so You can go ahead and download. This is a free download for everybody. It's the total instructions on how to make the neck warmer, but I'm going to be walking you through all of it as well. But you can go ahead and download that for specifics on everything. And there is a link in there if you're interested in checking out this particular yarn, because it might not be super easy to find otherwise. So I gave you guys a link. So you're just going to be needing about 218 yards of a chunky weight yarn, which is a number 5. So that's a little thicker than the number 4, which is worsted weight, which is what is like probably the most commonly used yarn in crochet in the United States anyway. I mean, we use all types of different yarns. I'm just trying to give you like an idea. Okay, so we're going to be using 2 of these skeins, and then I'm going to be using a J hook, which is a 6mm hook. But you will use whatever hook you need to in order to get gauge, or something pretty close to gauge, and we'll be talking about that as we go through. Because I'm trying out all these different yarns for this project, especially this Hue and Me yarn. Even though this is the same yarn weight technically, it is like a firmer yarn. It is a little bit thicker than the yarn that I designed this for. Let me see if I can pull in a little strand here. So when they look pretty similar here in my hand, but when you pull on this a little, you can see how it gets a little thinner. So it's got a lot of bounce and loftiness to it. This one here doesn't change as much. It's a little bit more of a firm yarn. So when this one crochets up, it crochets up just a little bit bigger, which means if you follow the directions exactly as written, your neck warmer will be a little bit bigger, which seems fine actually. It's a little bit longer in this direction, a little bit wider in that direction, and those two things working together actually make it sit very well on your shoulders. So I think it's fine to get an approximate gauge is what I'm trying to say in a roundabout way. Like, don't worry too much about it. Okay, so you just need the yarn, the hook, and then I would recommend a sharp tapestry needle if you have one. So I've got 2 tapestry needles here. This one is a blunt tapestry needle, and that's normally what I use to weave in my ends. But I wanted to make this cowl reversible, or like it doesn't have a right side or a wrong side, because I don't really like, when I'm running out the door and I'm in a big hurry, I just want to be able to throw it on and not worry about if it's inside out or not. So when I weave in my ends, I really want to bury them into the thickness of the cowl. So I did that. That was a little easier to do with a sharper tapestry needle. If you don't already have one of these, this will work just fine, so you don't have to go out and buy it or anything like that. But if you have one, grab the sharper tapestry needle if you've got that. Let's see. Okay, and then if you want to use some removable stitch markers, that can help you kind of keep track of the pattern changes as we're going through here. And I'll let you know as we're working our way through where you would use those. And that's it. Not a lot of variety of materials. We just need a couple of basics, right? So it's always a bonus when you don't need to get a whole long list of things. It doesn't need to be complicated to be something really cool. Oh, we've got lots of hellos. Thank you for popping in, you guys. Hi to Sandy from Austria. Cool. And Marilyn says, where did you find the bowl that holds your yarn? Okay, so you must be talking about this bowl. Marilyn, this bowl was made by my friend Mary Lydia. She's a potter, and I'm not sure if she still has a store on Instagram. She might. If you look for bunny bowls and then you see a bunch of pottery that looks like this, she does mugs, all kinds of things, and she bases them on her bunnies. And she's also branched out, and I think now she's doing like more florals with animals or something like that too. She's just like super talented. Anyway, I'm not sure if I think she sells her stuff at art fairs and festivals and that sort of thing, but you might be able to find her on Instagram. Okay, does Muse have a website we can order from? Yes, I did put a link to the Muse website in the pattern download, so you can look for that. And hi, Hannah, glad you're here. Good morning to you too. Oh, okay, and Sandy's saying, yep, Hue and Me is from Lion Brand. Thank you. I just kind of forgot that sometimes. I have so much yarn, you guys, and I should really bring my ball bands in whenever I'm talking about stuff like that so I can remind myself. And, Dana's wondering how long the tutorial is. They're usually about an hour, but I tend to ramble on over an hour, so probably like an hour, 10 minutes or something like that. All right, because I have a hard time, getting my tutorials to be within that hour frame because I like talking about yarn so much. Okay, So let's get started on this. We're going to start out with a chain. Okay, so first of all, when we make this cowl, we're going to be making it sideways in turned rows, and we're going to be working most of it in the back loop. So we'll be talking about all those things if you've never done that before as we go, but just to kind of let you know where we're headed here. So we're going to put a slip knot on our hook, and then we're going to make a chain of 38. Okay, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30, 31, 32, 33, 34, 35, 36, 37, 38. Okay, so that 38th stitch that we just made, the 30th chain, that's just going to count as a turning chain. We're not going to work into it. So we're going to, if you place your chain on the table, you can see that there's all these little V's kind of going in this direction, all stacked up. If you roll that towards you onto the table, so the V's are touching the table, you'll see that there's all these little horizontal dashes on the back, and that's where I like to begin working. It just makes for a tidier edge, and then later on we're going to be doing a little slip stitch seaming. It just makes it a little bit easier to seam our pieces together. So we're going to start in the second chain from the hook. Okay, so here's the first chain, there's the second chain, and we're just going to insert our hook underneath that strand, yarn over, bring it through, and then bring it through that loop on our hook, like that. So that's our first stitch. That's a slip stitch. So we're starting out with a little 3 rows, basically, of slip stitch. And then on the rows 2 and 3, we're going to be working it through the back loop. So we're going to insert here, grab our yarn, pull through, pull it through that loop on our hook, and we'll do that again, and we're going to repeat that all the way across our piece. So when you do these slip stitches, if you are finding that your stitches are becoming tight, this is something that's very common for people to have really tight slip stitches. You can switch up to a larger hook if you'd like, and then later on when you start working the other patterns, which I'll be showing you in a little bit, then you can switch back to, back down to this hook size if that's helpful. If you're finding though that, if you switch up to a bigger hook, and you make your slip stitches, it might be hard for you on the next row to get your hook into your stitches. So because you didn't actually fix what's actually causing you to be making those stitches tight, which is, just slow down and watch as you pull your loop through and then pull through that loop on your hook. You want to make sure, watch this loop right here, make sure if you pull a little too tight, then that loop will tighten up right here. So I'm doing this kind of exaggerated so you can see. Just if you slow down and make that loop a little taller, just pull it up a little more, and then when you pull it through this loop on the hook, just kind of pull it like that and don't pull in this direction. Don't allow that loop to get smaller. Then you won't have that problem. And maybe you won't have this problem anyway. But I do know, the reason I'm bringing this up is because I used to design a lot of things in the slip stitch through the back loop only ribbing. So like cuffs of mittens and hats and anything that you would want to be very stretchy and elastic and snap right back into shape, because that stitch is just incredibly good at doing that. So as soon as I discovered that, I was like, what? I can't believe this stitch pattern exists. Why did I not know about this? It's even more elastic and stretchy and returns to shape even better than knitting does. So I was very excited about it, and I started designing all kinds of things in that, and I would get lots of comments on like, this stitch is impossible, I can't get my hook in this stitch. So I knew, sorry, I didn't mean to make it sound so like that weird voice, but these were the comments I was getting, and so I realized, oh, this is tricky, this is harder, people are having a hard time with the stitch pattern. So I always, when I use it, I don't usually use it as much anymore, and I use it in these live tutorials where I can kind of explain if you're having trouble making those stitches what to do. Okay, so we reached the end. We're going to chain one. We're going to turn our work like you're turning a very long, skinny page in a book, just like that. And now we're going to work across, making our slip stitches into the back loop only. So normally when we work into our stitches, so this little chain here, when we turned our work, that chain is not going to count as a stitch, so that means we're not working into it. We're just using it as like a little ladder to get up to the next level. And here is the stitch where we would actually begin, right here. So normally we would place our hook underneath both loops of the stitch, but now we're going to be working underneath just the back loop, which is right here. Okay, so just underneath there. And we're going to be doing the same stitch. So we're going to insert our hook, grab that yarn, pull through the stitch, and pull through the loop on your hook. So that's our first slip stitch through the back loop. And we're just going to continue that all the way across. Okay, so you're just going to be working into that back loop only, and making those slip stitches across. And then when you get to the end, you will chain one, turn your work, and work one more row. So it's a total of 3 rows in slip stitch. The second row and the third row are both going to be worked into the back loop, how I'm showing you here. So what your piece will look like is like this, okay? So this is kind of making a very, like a firm edge. It just makes a nice edging on your piece. Here, let me pull it over here so you can see what this looks like. So that we're making this edge right here, just to give it a little bit of definition, a little bit of a border. It's kind of like doing the edging before you even start. Okay, so we've worked up through row number 3. And then, there we go. And now we're going to be starting in our pattern stitch. So as we create this cowl, we're going to be working those first 3 stitches over here, and then the last 3 stitches over here are going to be worked in a different stitch pattern than what's in between. So this is all going to be one stitch pattern in the middle, and then on this end and on this end, we're going to be working in a different stitch pattern. So they're similar, so we have to slow down and then really pay attention to what you're doing until you get the hang of it, because this, the stitches we're going to be doing could be confused for, you know, we just need to make sure we're doing the yarn overs in the right places and not adding extra yarn overs in certain parts. So we're going to chain one, and we're going to turn our work. And I'm going to check in here because, oh my goodness, lots of people saying hello. Let's see. Oh, Molly says, love the yarn. Yeah, it's so pretty. Oh, and Toya is here for the very first time catching a live event. Hi, thank you. I'm glad you found us. I'm glad you're here. Awesome. Okay, so we've got a good morning from Grammy. And Kim says, hello from Kentucky. Is there a specific name for the green yarn you have from that muse? So this yarn, this is a rhino base, and this is called velveteen. And then this, and which is the same as this cowl here that I made it up in. And then this yarn is fern, I think is the colorway, and it's the same thing. It's the rhino base, and it's the Muse 2320 yarn as well. I hope that answered your question. Okay, so we're going to be starting here on row number 4. So we're going to, for the first 3 stitches, we're going to work in the yarn over slip stitch through the back loop stitch pattern. Okay, so that was a lot. Now this is slightly different than the slip stitch through the back loop pattern, which we were just doing. So those were all slip stitches, and this is a variation of that, where you do a yarn over first, and then you insert your hook, and again, we're just working in that back loop. Insert your hook, yarn over, and then you're going to pull up that loop, and then you're going to continue pulling that same loop through the 2 loops that are on your hook, like that. Okay, so we'll do that again. We'll yarn over, insert, yarn over, pull up, and then we're going to continue pulling that same loop through the 2 loops on our hook. Yarn over, insert, yarn over, pull up, continue pulling through those 2. Now, some of you might be thinking, is that not a half double crochet, Brenda? It's very close to a half double crochet, but actually a half double crochet is next. That half double crochet is going to be part of this center stitch pattern. So I'm going to show you the difference here. So in the next stitch, again, all the way across, we're going to be working in that back loop. Okay, so just keep that in your brain. To do a half double crochet in the back loop, we're going to yarn over, insert through the back loop, yarn over, and pull up a loop. And on the previous 2 stitches, we pulled this loop directly through those 2 loops. But on a half double crochet, we do an additional yarn over to pull through all 3 at once. So that's the difference. And that stitch is just a slightly taller than these stitches right here. Then the next stitch we're going to do is a slip stitch through the back loop. So we're going to, again, go through that back loop, grab that yarn, pull through, and pull through. Okay, so that is the same stitch that we were using here just to go back and forth. All right, so now, so far we've learned 3 stitches here. We've got slip stitch through the back loop, which we just did. The one before that was a half double crochet through the back loop. And then these 3 stitches on the end where we started, those are a yarn over slip stitch through the back loop. Okay, and so we're going to be repeating that half double crochet, slip stitch, half double crochet, all the way across our piece until there are 3 stitches left at the end. Okay, so we're going to start with that half double crochet. So yarn over, insert, yarn over, pull up, yarn over, pull through all 3. And then we'll do a slip stitch here, and then a half double crochet, and then a slip stitch, and then a half double crochet, and then a slip stitch. Okay, so we're just going to continue working this all the way across through that back loop only for every stitch. So if you have worked the moss stitch before in crochet, that is a stitch pattern that is used that uses a half double crochet alternating with a slip stitch all the way across. It's exactly the same thing we're doing here, except we are working this in the back loop, and then the next row is actually going to be a little bit offset from how we normally do our moss stitch. But it's the same 2 stitches that make up this stitch. As far as I know, this stitch doesn't have a name. I kind of looked to see if I could find other people using this and didn't find too much. I'm sure other people are using this. But because, in crochet there's only, there's all these different combinations that you can do, and I feel like inventing something nobody has ever done before is extremely rare. So maybe there is a name for it, and maybe someone can tell us, but to me, in my mind, it's just a variation of the moss stitch. All right, so just note when you've got 3 stitches left here, you will have just worked a half double crochet. Okay, so that little stitch pattern that's in the middle of our piece, it starts with a half double crochet and alternates half double crochet, slip stitch, half double crochet, la 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 across until there's 3 left, and you will be ending it with a half double crochet before you work those last 3 stitches. Okay, so here's the last 3 stitches, and we're going to do the same thing we did at the beginning of the row. So that we're going to do a yarn over slip stitch. So we're going to place our yarn, make our yarn over, insert our hook into the back loop, grab that yarn, pull through, and pull through 2. So here's another one, and here's a third one. Just like that. And now we're going to chain 1, and I like to do these pretty tight to keep the edge looking neat. And then we're going to turn our work. All right, so we're going to start out with the same 3 stitches in the same stitch pattern. So those are all yarn over slip stitches through the back loop only, and it's going to be the exact same thing on every single row until we get to the last 3 rows of this project. So we've got those yarn over slip stitches through the back loop only. And now here is our half double crochet from the previous row. Normally in a moss stitch, you would work your slip stitches into your half double crochets, but we're not doing that this time. We are working the same stitch into the like stitch, if that makes sense. So this is a half double crochet, and we're going to start with a half double crochet. And then our next stitch is a slip stitch, and we're going to work a slip stitch. And again, we're working into the back loop, and we're going to be doing that throughout the rest of this entire project. So there's our slip stitch, and now here's our half double crochet. And here's our slip stitch. And we're going to continue alternating half double, slip stitch, half double, slip stitch, half double, slip stitch, all the way across until we have 3 stitches left. And you guys, this is so easy to memorize because you don't have to know what row you're on. It doesn't change per row. It is a 1 row repeat. It's exactly the same thing for every single row until we get towards the end of the cowl. And then we'll switch it up a little bit and do another little slip stitch border. There's one little anomaly halfway through the cowl where we create a little slit in the cowl, which I kind of showed you earlier. And so I'll be showing you guys how to do that in just a minute. But other than that, this is most of it right here, just learning this stitch pattern. And you can, the slip stitches and the half double crochets do look fairly similar, but I think when you have a little more experience looking at these stitches, you will start to see there's a difference between them. So right here is a slip stitch, and the reason I know is because if it were a half double crochet, it would have this sort of bumpy diagonal thing coming down in front. So here's a slip stitch, just looking at it, and this is a half double crochet because you can see this sort of diagonal, kind of bump sticking out. So just remember, if you see a slip stitch, you're going to work a slip stitch into it. If you see a half double crochet, you're going to work a half double crochet into it. Slip stitch, and here is our last stitch of that pattern, our half double crochet. Now we've got 3 stitches left, and we're going to do that yarn over slip stitch through the back loop. So yarn over, insert, yarn over, pull up, and continue pulling that loop through the 2 loops. Right there, like that. Then we will chain 1 and turn our work. Okay, and so you're starting to see like a little groove here, a little row of bumps, and as we continue, you'll start to see that sort of ribbed appearance showing up. So here's our first 3 stitches. Those are the yarn over slip stitches through the back loop only. And now here we have on that 4th stitch, that is our half double crochet stitch. So in the back loop, of course, and then a slip stitch, half double crochet, and then a slip stitch, half double crochet, and a slip stitch. So the stitch pattern is really fun. It's so easy to make, and it looks kind of complicated when you look at it. It isn't recognizable, I feel like, as a regular crochet stitch, and it has a lot of stretch to it, a lot of texture, but it looks very neat and orderly. Like your eye can definitely pick out, these like little stripes and bumps. Let me pull in a larger amount of fabric so you guys can see what this looks like. So you can see those it's sort of corrugated, it's got all these like grooves and bumps, but they look very orderly, and they're really stretchy, and it bounces back pretty well into shape like that. So it's nice because it doesn't get all, cowls will stretch out to some degree as you wear them over time, but you can always wash it and block it and then reshape it. But I do like a stitch pattern that holds its shape a little bit better, and for these types of things that I want to be fairly close to the neck and really blocking out the cold. And speaking of close to the neck, this is a very soft, super soft merino yarn. So that is actually a big reason why I chose this particular project for that yarn, because I knew that it was going to be really soft next to my skin and not be itchy to me. So I can't promise it can't be itchy to anybody, because if you do have a wool sensitivity, it might be itchy. But I find that superwash wools tend to be a little softer, probably because their scales are not very scaly anymore, so they just aren't as tickly. But yeah, this is the one that I'm using right here, this is a very soft yarn as well. This is the merino. This is not what's in the pattern notes. This is the Knit Picks Swish Chunky. That's what this one is here. All right, so we've worked to the end of our row, finishing up with those 3 stitches of the yarn over slip stitch, the back loop only. We had started with that over here, and then we've got that pattern stitch, that variation of the crochet moss stitch in between. So you're going to continue working that back and forth until you've worked 28 rows of the moss stitch. Or you can count up, you will have worked up through row number 31, I think. Let me just double check. Yes, because there were 3 rows of slip stitching. So you will have finished row number 31, and your piece will look, ooh, we're almost there. I'm partway through my row number 31 here. So let me finish that up. And then I will show you what happens on row number 32. Actually, let's talk about how to count your rows in the stitch pattern, because it may not be obvious. So if you put your yarn tail on the right side here, so that's on your right, if you have worked an even number of rows, your yarn tail will be on the left, because as you start out and you do that first row, you do a bunch of chains, and row number 1 starts over here and ends where the yarn tail is. So if you ended on the side where the yarn tail is, you've worked an odd number of rows. So this would be me working, here I've already started on row number 32, I believe, but let's count up and see where we're at. So we know that if this was over here, that this would actually be, if this was at this corner right here, this would actually be an even, we would have finished an even number of rows right here if our yarn tail was over here. So let's count this up. So we've got a little groove here, so that's going to count as our first stitch, and here this ridge here is going to count as our second. So a groove is 1, a ridge is 2. Okay, so we're going to count in groups of 2. So we've got 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, 20, 22, 24, 26, 28. So here we are working on the next row here. Sorry, I hope that wasn't confusing. This was 28 rows of the stitch pattern, but we have actually worked 31 rows in the cowl pattern, if that makes sense. So 28 rows of this variation of the moss stitch. And that the reason I kind of call that out is because it's really easy to count from this groove right here. This is like an easy spot to start. So at this point, this would be row 1, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, 20, 22, 24, 26, 28, okay? The other thing to note is if you are using a slightly different yarn or your gauge is different than mine, this should be at about your halfway point for your cowl. So this is going to be the width. And now I want to show you something. Part of the reason this cowl is designed this way, to have this kind of asymmetrical shape where we have a slit on this side and then a slit on this side, is because as I was working this up, I knew I wanted to get it out of those 2 skeins, make really good use of those 2 skeins. And I thought, if I put this cowl kind of on a diagonal, because what happens is when you fold this down like this, you can see, oops, there we go. So what we're actually doing is we're folding the top edge at a little bit of a diagonal, because you've got 1 point coming out here and 1 point coming out here. You can fold it exactly evenly like this, just fold it in half. And that works as well. But I really wanted to fold it in a way so that those corners really come down. And when you wear it, to me, it looks like you have something wrapped around your neck, and that's where the 2 ends of the scarf kind of ended up. They kind of cross over each other in the front. If this is a little confusing, if you check out the picture on the front of the download, you'll see what I mean. But you can see those 2 little ends kind of poking down. What happens when you do that is you actually are allowing this, because this is at a diagonal now, you can see here's the ribbing. This is at a diagonal now, this tube. And these little slits are going to allow it to fit over your shoulders on the 2 sides and allow it to kind of flare out, because that's how your body is shaped like that. Then you get a little bit more extra width out of your cowl, meaning you don't have to use like as much yarn to get all the way around and still have all that warmth in the front and everything folded over twice. Anyway, just a little insight into my designer brain there. So this should be about your halfway point of your cowl, so it doesn't actually have to measure half of the circumference that you want it to be when you're wearing it this way, but if you fold your piece like this, and you kind of grab onto this side and you grab onto this side. See how those those 2 points are kind of coming down here and here? That's giving you a little extra width. You can see this is a little wider than just this when it's straight on, okay? So don't worry if it's not, you know, if you're worried the cowl isn't going to be quite as big as you want it to be, just keep in mind you're going to be folding it on a diagonal later. Okay, so here we have that 28th row. So we're working on the 28th row of that pattern repeat, which would actually be after we had worked 31 rows of the cowl directions. We would be right here. So this is me working row number 32. I've already started on that here. So in row number 32, I'll just back this up a little bit so you guys can see me work this from the beginning. This is exactly what we've been doing so far. It's exactly the same. It starts out the same. We're going to do that yarn over, slip stitch through the back loop. So 1, oops, I split my yarn a little there. 2 and 3. So we've got those 3 stitches. Then we're going to switch to the half double crochet and slip stitch pattern, and that's going to be worked through the back loop again, across. Now we're going to be stopping before we get to the end. So we're doing a repeat of, I believe, let's see, I thought it was 10. Yeah, 10 times. Okay, so we're repeating that half double crochet, slip stitch, half double crochet, slip stitch. We're repeating that half double crochet, slip stitch. We're working that 10 times across. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. Okay, so we should be, you know, like about 2/3 of the way across our piece where we're ending up. And then this little section right here, we're just going to be working some slip stitches. So we're going to do a total of 14 slip stitches. So we're just doing slip stitches through the back loop. So I'm going to actually place a stitch marker in that very first slip stitch that we made just now, okay, so let me clarify. The first slip stitch after we finished repeating that pattern. So the pattern was half double crochet, slip stitch, half double crochet, slip stitch, right? So after we repeated the half double crochet, slip stitch pattern across here 10 times, now we're starting with another slip stitch. So it's right next to the slip stitch where we ended, okay? But I want to mark the one that's part of this next pattern stitch. So these are all going to be slip stitches through the back loop all the way across, starting with this marked stitch. So the last 14 stitches are, you know, you should mark that stitch right there, and we're going to be doing another 13 stitches here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, and 13. Then we're going to chain 1. We're going to turn our work. And then we're going to do 14 slip stitches once again. So working through that back loop. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, and our 14th slip stitch is in that marked stitch. So I'm going to remove that, place it back in that slip stitch we just made. And now this section here is going to be continuing in this whole stitch pattern we've been working over here, okay? So we're going to be starting that with a slip stitch right here. So here's our first slip stitch and then our half double crochet. Okay, so we're just working this stitch pattern as if we never stopped in this little section here. Oh, hello, Janet. I'm glad that you're here. I'm glad you could be here. Oh, and Sandy, I reckon. Okay, let's see. When you fold it like that, the ends will also end up under the collar of your winter jacket. More warmth, and it holds its place better. Exactly. Yes, that's what I was thinking is like, you put this on and then you put your coat on over it. And I really meant for it to just sort of cover your neck and then come down in the front and in the back. And then you don't want as much stuff on your shoulders because I find that to be kind of annoying if I'm wearing a bulky cowl or sweater or something like that, collar. And then putting my jacket over it, I find it kind of annoying. So that's why I was trying to have those slits on the side. So it really just comes down in front and then you put your coat over that. So, and I mean, you could certainly just wear this as like, a statement piece. If you're working in a drafty office or it's a little chilly where you live, you could just pop on the cowl. It's not like you have to be wearing it outside under your coat, of course, but that's how I was envisioning it when I was designing this piece. All right, so we're continuing across in that same stitch pattern where we're working the half double crochets, alternating with the slip stitches until we get to those last 3 stitches. I have a question here from Tanya. What is the purpose of ending 3 stitches with those specific stitches instead of doing the full half double crochet? Oh, that is a good question. So, oh, she sees it now. Okay, creates a nice edging. Yes. So it's pretty subtle, but you can maybe see there's a difference between how this looks right here and how this looks right here. In real life, this is pretty, in real life. I mean, when you see this, when you create this in your lap, you'll see it a little bit better. I think it's a little harder to see on camera, but this is a little bit lower profile. This is a little bit bumpier, and I just liked how it looked to have this extra stretchy bit, and it makes it, I feel like it just makes a neater edge to it. Now, if you're like, ugh, that's too much to remember, I don't want to do that. You don't have to do that. You could just work this stitch pattern back and forth. Like you could just learn from the stitch pattern, starting with, you'd have an odd number of stitches and you'd start with a half double crochet and then end with a half double crochet, and you just continue working in that stitch pattern, and you can make a really awesome, lovely cowl just with that stitch pattern. You don't have to monkey around with all these other stitches. I just threw this in there because I really liked how this edging looked, and I liked how easy it stretched and it wants to spring back into shape, and that aspect of this particular stitch pattern I thought would be really good for the bottom of the cowl when you're pulling it on, so that it can kind of flare out, and then when you take it off, it shrinks back. So it's partly functional, partly how it looks, but also, you're in charge of your own crochet, and you can, you can learn these different stitch patterns, and then you can make up whatever you want to. You can make the cowl just as a regular tube in this stitch pattern if you want. That would make a really nice cowl as well. So you got lots of options when you know all these different stitches. You can put them together however you like them to be. All right, so here's our last half double crochet through the back loop, and now we've got those 3 stitches, and we're going to be doing our yarn over slip stitch through the back loop only for those last 3 stitches here. We'll chain 1, turn our work, and now you can see it's a little taller here, a little narrower here, and this is like a kind of a more dense area of some slip stitching here. This is going to be the edge of one of those slits right here. That's what is forming right here. So we're going to do the next row, which is row number 34. If you're following along, or if you want to check this out later, we're going to be doing that yarn over slip stitch through the back loop in the first 3 stitches. And then we're going to work that half double crochet alternating with the slip stitch all the way across until we get to the stitch before our marked stitch. In the pattern, it tells you to, do the repeat of the half double crochet, slip stitch combination. You're going to do that 10 times. All right, here we are. There's our half double crochet. Here is our last stitch before that marker. Okay, so we're going to stop with that slip stitch. And now, instead of continuing here, we're going to chain 15. So the last of those chains is just going to count as a turning chain, but we're going to do 15 chains here. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. And now I'm going to turn my work so I can work back in the opposite direction. And this is row number 35. We're going to start with a second chain from the hook. So here's the first chain, here's the second chain, and we're going to work into the back loop, not the bottom, because if we worked into the bottom of this chain, like I normally like to work into the bottom of my chain, that's going to cause this to be twisted over here and be kind of weird right where it joins on. So we're just going to be working in the back loop. So that just means we're inserting our hook right here. See, there's the V, we're just putting it through one loop there. But if you're unsure about where that loop is, don't stress out about it too much, because it really doesn't matter that much. Later on, we're going to be putting a little edging into these stitches here, but there will be loops for you to place your hook in. You don't need to worry about it. I'm just trying to be clear in case you want to be following my pattern exactly. All right, so we're just doing those slip stitches through the back loop of this chain. And then once we get back to that section where we had been working the slip stitch, half double crochet repeated, then we're going to go back into that stitch pattern, okay? So here is a slip stitch, that's our next stitch. So we're going to do a slip stitch here and a half double crochet here. Slip stitch, half double crochet. Again, still working into that back loop. So we're right back into our pattern stitch. Oh, Belle says, I just joined, but I'll be going back to watch from the beginning. I think it'll be a nice Christmas gift for everyone. Thank you. You're welcome. That was my hope, is that, you know, this is kind of it's a doable project, I feel like, for a lot of people. From now until Christmas, you know, it doesn't take too much time. Once you get the hang of these stitches, it's pretty quick, and it, you know, it's one of those things that doesn't take a ton of yarn either, so that's also helpful when you're trying to figure out gifts for people. All right, so here's our last 3 stitches. These are all yarn over through the back loop. Yarn over slip stitches through the back loop. We chain 1, we turn, and then we're going to continue working back and forth again in that same stitch pattern all the way across. So once you get over to this little section here, you just continue working into it. And it might be a little tricky to see where exactly is the top of this. I can't tell. If you're having trouble figuring it out, just make sure you're looking at the tops of your stitches. So there's always going to be those V's that are going to be in this direction, okay? So you can see these are the tops of those stitches. So once you get over to this little section here where we just have those slip stitches, you're just going to be working underneath these loops. These are the back loops of those stitches, okay? So you're just going to continue working back and forth in the same stitch pattern. You're going to be doing that little ribbing along the edge, and then you're going to do that variation of the moss stitch in the middle. And then again, you're going to be doing from this point on those 28 rows of this same stitch pattern, just like we did here, and you'll be able to count it up. And then we're going to end with 3 rows of slip stitches. So let's just say, I'm not quite there yet on this piece. You can see this little section's a little bit shorter, but I'm running out of yarn on this, so I just wanted to show you the slip stitch. This would be the next step you would do if you had counted up your 28 rows right here. So if you're trying to figure out, oh, I don't know how to count them from this point, you can either count rows starting from the bottom and count along the uninterrupted edge, or you can come over here to this little slit, and you'll know that the row number, let me see what this is called. Row number 35, let's see, is that right? Yep. row number 35 is the first row in this direction on top of that little chain that we made. So remember in row number 34, we stitched along, la-di-da-di-da, and then we get over to here and we do that chain. Okay, that's where we first separate. We stop stitching into these stitches and we do that chain. Row number 35, we're stitching in this direction and we work those slip stitches into that chain and work our way across. Okay, so row number 36 would be right here. So this would be row number 36. This would be our first row of that 28 row repeat, or not 28 row repeat, but our repeat of this one row for 28 rows. Okay, so this would be the first, the second, the third, the fourth, the fifth, the sixth. So if we count our grooves as row number 2, so that would be 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, 20. I've only got 22 rows here. So I'd have to do, 6 more before I'm ready for the next step. Let's just imagine I did that. We counted up our 28 rows. And just so you know, because you are, let's see, row number is this? 63 would be the last row that you would work if you counted your rows all the way from the very beginning. So that means 63 is an odd row. So that means your beginning yarn loop, or your ending, your very last stitch where your working yarn is, that should be on the same side of your piece as your very beginning yarn tail. Because remember, when you're stitching toward that yarn tail in this direction, that means you're working an odd numbered row. Okay, so let's just imagine we have worked up through row number 63, and now we're going to be doing 3 more rows of our slip stitch pattern. So we'll just chain 1, we'll turn our work, and then we're just going to work a slip stitch into the back loop all the way across. So we're just doing those slip stitches. This is what we did at the very beginning of our piece, working back and forth in turned rows in a slip stitch. This is not the yarn over slip stitch. This is just a slip stitch in each stitch across, working in that back loop. Okay, so you would do that. Get to the end, chain 1, turn, go back in this direction, chain 1, turn, and go back in that direction. So you have a total of 3 of those rows. And your piece will look like this. Here we go. It looks like I have a couple more stitches left of this last row of slip stitches. But you should be ending on the same side as the slit, and the opposite end of your beginning yarn tail, if that makes sense, because you just did 3 more rows. We're just finishing up that very last row of slip stitches, and then I'll show you how to seam it together. All right, we're going to chain 1, we're going to turn our work, and then we're going to take our foundation chain edge, which is right here, and we're going to place that right up in front of the last row that we worked. Okay, so here's our foundation chain edge. Here's the last row that we worked, and we're going to slip stitch part of this across, and then we're going to leave a section open. So that's going to create the second slit. So let's see. We are in this little section in our pattern. It's after all those rows. This is explaining how to do this, just in case you're wondering and you want to find this later in your directions. But we're just going to be doing slip stitches for 23 stitches, and then we're going to leave the remaining 14 unworked. I know this says 22 here, but that's because we work 1 slip stitch and then we do it 22 more stitches, sorry. So we've already chained 1, and we're going to place our hook into the back loop of the row in front, the back loop of the row in back, grab that yarn, pull through the loop on our hook to create a slip stitch. So again, we're placing our hook in the very back loop, and then through the back loop of the edge behind, grab that yarn, pull through, and pull through. So that's 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. So just I'm going to keep doing this and trying to count while I'm talking. We'll see how that goes. But if instead of doing these slip stitches, if you prefer to just fasten off and then you could abut those two edges together and do a whip stitch, that is another way to do it. I actually almost designed it that way because it lays a little flatter. But then I thought, oh, you don't really even see this edge, and after you block it, it's plenty flat, so I didn't worry about it because I feel like this is a faster way to do it. I think most crocheters appreciate when you don't have to do a lot of sewing type of finishing at the end. Actually, I am curious about that. If you have thoughts or strong opinions about doing any sewing or finishing in your projects, let me know. I'm curious what you guys think about that, because I have heard lots of people talk about, oh, that's too much sewing, I don't want to do that sewing. But maybe it's only the people who really don't want to do the sewing who are vocal about it. Maybe most people don't mind. Hard to know. Okay, so let's check and see how many we have left here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. Oh, I was off by 1. I'll just pull that one out. All right, so we've got our 14 stitches left on this little edge here, and then we're just going to go ahead and fasten off. So I'm just going to cut my yarn, give yourself enough to weave in, and pull that through. Well, Vanessa says, I have a wool allergy and I don't like working with or wearing acrylic yarn. Do you have a recommendation for chunky cotton or cotton blend yarn that would work just as well? Let me think on that. I feel like Knit Picks has a fluffy, chunky cotton yarn that they sell. I've never used it, so I can't like wholeheartedly recommend it because I've never used it, but I think it would be nice if you could find a yarn that's cotton that has some kind of loft to it, or maybe it's like one of those chainette structures that's a tube, and then they blow fibers into it, although I don't know, I think they do that with cotton, and maybe that's how that one is made, I can't remember. But it would be nice if your cotton yarn wasn't like, you know, like a dishcloth cotton or something that was a harder yarn. I think it would be more comfortable if it was one of those tube structured yarns that has the fiber blown into it. I don't know the name of it. I'll try and pop back in to after I check it out later. But maybe someone else has a suggestion. I have not worked very much with cotton yarns for cold weather things like cowls and mittens and hats and that sort of thing, but that is an interesting thing for me to think about. And maybe I can come up with some good alternatives, because that would be, I'm sure there are a lot of other people in your same shoes about that. So thank you for bringing that up. I appreciate that. Let's see here. Oh, Bella says very pretty colors on all those demo ones. I know. And I just really like all the colors together, you guys. I was looking at them today and I was like, I wasn't thinking about them as being together, but I really like them together. Okay, so here's our slip stitch seam. There's our little yarn tail. We can go ahead and weave that in, but I'm gonna show you how, and maybe we'll get to that later, but hopefully we'll get to weaving it in later. But I wanna show you how to finish this up. So this is the slit that we first made right here, and it needs a little help because we did that crochet across, and I just feel like it's gonna get stretched out here. Plus I wanted this to be more of an edging so that it kind of, you can see a more dense stitching line, like in this section here. Along these edges here, you can really see that kind of border, that edge. So in order to mimic that, we are going to do some slip stitches back and forth across here. So we've got our slip stitch seam here, and in the directions I tell you to turn this in to the inside of your work. Now to me, there's no right side or wrong side to this piece, but just flip it to the inside as it is. And then we're going to start stitching across here. So with this side facing, you would join your yarn to the section and get ready to stitch across. If you were a left-handed crocheter, you would be working it across, you would be joining on the bottom edge and going that way. I'm right-handed, so I'm going to be starting here and going that way. And we're just going to pull up a loop of this yarn in that very first stitch through the back loop. So I'm going to insert my hook. and just grab a little loop of that yarn. Just make sure you have enough to weave in. I'm going to pull that a little closer. There we go. And then we're going to just start doing our slip stitches. So we're going to work into that second stitch, grab that yarn, pull through the loop on our hook. And we're just doing that slip stitch through the back loop all the way across. And so that should be a total of 14 stitches, because remember we did, when we made that slit, we chained 14 plus we had one extra for that turning chain. So we've got those 14 stitches across. There's my last stitch. And then you could just kind of skip over that stretched out part of a stitch there, and then just start working into these loops on the other side. Here we go. So this was, you know, the little section, the foundation chain, I guess, once we added, we chained, and then we worked directly into that chain. So we don't have 2 loops to choose from here, so you're just gonna have to, you know, work into each of these loops as they come up. And there should be 14 of them as well. All right, I've got 2 more left. There we go. And then we're going to chain 1, turn our work, and now we're going to do another row of slip stitches through that back loop. So this row just helps to add a little bit of structure to that side slit, and it also protects, you know, it makes it look a little neater and tidier along the slit, but it also protects it, you know, it's going to keep it from getting too stretched out at the top of that slit. We don't want our stitches to get all stretched out and look funny. So these slip stitches are great because they really kind of hold things in. It's not going to be able to stretch very much here at the top of this, where the slit stops, basically. Oh, we've got a couple of opinions here. Let's see. Okay, Bella says, I try to avoid any sewing at all if that's possible. Okay, so we got 1 vote for the, I don't want to sew everything. And Hannah says, I love the slip stitch join, but if sewing is necessary, I don't mind it. Okay. Okay, so Leah is asking, what yarn is it? I'm guessing you're talking about this blue cowl that I'm working on here. This is Rhino from Muse 2320. There's a link in the download if you want to follow that to find the store, to find the Rhino page. Rhino is the name of the base, and then the name of the color of this blue is blue hydrangea. Okay, and Sandy says, I actually don't mind it. Okay, all right, so we got 2 votes for not minding it so far, and Susan says, I end up not getting the edges correct when sewing together. I guess I'm just in too much of a hurry. I understand that. I completely understand that. It's like you're almost done and you can just hardly wait until it's finished, right? I get that feeling. Okay, so there's our very last stitch. We're just gonna cut off our yarn, fasten off, and pull through. All right, so let's talk a little bit about this weaving in of the ends, because we're done with our cowl, except, of course, for the weaving in of the ends. So I'm just going to pick an end to weave in here. Maybe I'll pick one that well, I think this will be fine. I'll pick this one. So earlier at the beginning, I was recommending using a sharp tapestry needle. And the reason why is because I feel like it's easier to bury your tail in the thickness of the, stitches. So if you don't care, if you want to make excuse me, if you want to make one side of the cowl the right side and one side the wrong side, or the side you don't see, then it doesn't matter so much if you, sorry, I'm going to get a drink of water so you don't have to listen to that. If you want to just designate one side as the wrong side, then you don't have to be as careful about how you weave in those ends. But if you want to let it be, so you can, like basically a reversible cowl, so you can just throw it on, fold it, not care about what the outside is, then you will need to take that sharp needle and you're going to need to kind of weave it into the thickness of your stitches. Now you can't see it on the back. Oh, I see a little glinting through, so I'm going to move the path. It's in the thickness of the stitches, and that is easier to do with this type of yarn needle where it's actually sharp. And the thing is that I like about it is that it's going to keep it, because you're piercing through these strands, you're not going in between strands of yarn like how we normally do. You're piercing right through the centers of these strands. It's going to hold it a little bit better, Superwash yarns tend to be a little bit slippery sometimes, and so your yarn ends might pop out a little bit more than if you used a non-superwash wool. That would be a little grippier, and that would hold it in place a little bit better. So that's an extra bonus for using this method of the sharper tapestry needle. But if you don't have one, don't worry about it. You can just use your other tapestry needle, and you can probably pierce through those strands just fine as it is. I don't think it's going to give you too much trouble. It's just a little bit easier with that sharper needle. So you just go ahead and weave in all your ends. And and I should mention too, if you want to block your piece, you can block it while it is still open before you do that slip stitch seam, or you can block it afterwards as it is right now. It just is like a little folded over cube, and then you can go ahead and fold your piece. Just imagine I stitched all of these ends in, which I did not. I'll be doing that later. But again, I really like to fold this so that it's got these sort of little jaunty ends sticking out. This is just how I envisioned it, but of course this is your cowl, so you can do whatever you want with it. You can fold it however you like, but that is how I meant it to be, and that allows us to have a little bit of extra width here in the cowl if you kind of fold it at a little bit of an angle like that, if that makes sense. All right, let me see if there's any more questions. Okay, Leah says, it depends because I do a lot of hard sewing on amigurumi, so straight lines are fine, except it can be annoying to weave in and because I weave in very securely. Yeah, I hear ya. I do a lot of amigurumi too, so it is, but I feel like that makes you good at, sewing and being precise about it when you're working on amigurumi because it really affects the look of it so much. So that's actually, that's probably helped your seaming, I'm guessing, and made it, made you not dislike it too much. Okay, Leah says, is the green, teal, and blue yarn next to you? And what are you working on, acrylic or something else? Okay, so these yarns, and this one, the one that's in the picture on the download, these are all from Muse 2320. Here's the label right here. So these are all hand-dyed yarns, and I did put a link in the pattern so you can find this, because I know this is like a little bit of a specialty thing. So these are 100% merino wool. They're super soft, they're hand-dyed, and they're just, I really love this squishy, chunky yarn. So these are all chunky yarns. And then this one is Knit Pick Swish in a chunky, and this is the merino wool as well. It's very soft. And then this one, the brownish one, was Hue and Me Lion Brand. Thanks to whoever put that in there for me because I forgot earlier. And this is, I'm pretty sure it's 80% acrylic, 20% wool, but it might be 100% acrylic. I'm pretty sure it's 80-20, but it is Hue and Me. All right, so I think, let's see. Oh, do you have any samples with more than one color? Wondering where one might make color changes. Oh, I don't have any samples with more than one color, but I would say if you make your color changes, probably every other row would be good. I would try that. I would do just a little sample, just do a little swatch. There's actually directions in your download for just doing a swatch of the main stitch pattern in case you want to follow something. And then just switch it out. I actually think it could look really cool if you switched it on every single row, but then you'd have to carry your yarn and then maybe do some sort of edging. Not really sure. I haven't explored that yet. But if you look at it, it would be cool if these were a different color than if the ridges were a different color than the valleys between them. It would look sort of like brioche or like one of those two color ribbed things, I think it would look really cool. So that would be something to experiment with. All right. Okay, thank you guys so much for being here. I really appreciate it. I hope you guys have fun, and I hope you have a great holiday gifting season. I hope this becomes part of something that you're making. All right, thank you guys so much. Bye, everybody.